So hopefully you can see me okay and you'll be able to see the work that I'm going to show you today. If you've been following the mini-series that I have been posting online, we already worked through the feet and we worked the sen lines in the legs, and now I'm going to show you a little bit of stretching. The stretching works also on the sen lines, and of course it works the fascia and the muscles, creating flexibility, opening up the joints, creating more space and a sense of ease in the body. If you were to have a massage in Thailand, you would they always ask you, do you want it hard or soft? Because the tendency is to work beyond the limits normally of your comfort, and they're aware that people from the West generally are not so comfortable with that. For my point of view, I don't really believe that there's much sense in working beyond the stretch point and beyond the comfort levels of your client, because the client starts to react against you. And what we want is an opening and a relaxation and an opening of the tissue to come from inside. It's not something that I want to impose on the client. We want to work with the client's tissue, work with the client's own physiology, so that the relaxation will come from the inside and then filter to the outside. So you want to be working in that threshold of the sort of pain-pleasure threshold, but not going beyond that. And you can find out what that is by asking from feedback from your client, or eventually you will just get a feeling of where their edge is. And the stretches I do normally in a pattern of 3. So the first time is a little bit of an introduction, the second time you go to their boundary, and the third time you go a little bit beyond their edge. And I also would normally work with the breath, asking the client to take a deep inhalation, and on the exhalation going into the stretch. I might not do that when I'm demonstrating for you now, because it's a little bit of a different session, different feel. I'm just demonstrating, I'm not really in the flow of it. So just for you to bear that in mind. We've already warmed up the tissue, we've already warmed up the lines through the work we did previously. So I'm just going to show you a few stretches. There's so many different stretches, so many different ways you can work the body in Thai massage. This is just a little capture, and it's enough. So you can start just by holding the heel of your client with your palm of your hand, supporting the knee. Always be wary of the knee as a joint, because it's one of the more fragile joints in the body. And if your client has any issues, make sure that you don't put any torque on that area. Make sure that you always support it. So to begin with, we can just do a little bit of gentle rotation, find out how flexible the person is, start to see where their limits are, and just create a little bit of mobility through that hip joint. And whenever you're doing any of the gestures in Thai massage, try and incorporate your whole body movement, because it's a really different sensation for the person if you just do something like this, which is I'm just using my arms, and if you use your whole body, and it's also a lot less tiring for you. So wherever possible, use your body to create a fixed point. So for me now, I've got a fixed point with my arm on my thigh, and my elbow here is also a fixed point. You can create those 2 fixed points and then just do the range of motion. And then we're going to slide the foot into our inguinal crease. Might need to open out the client's arms if there's not enough space. And the leg is now fully supported through its connection in my body, along my thigh with my hand. And we can ask Matthias to take a deep inhale. And on the exhalation, we start to just come forward. You can create a counterlever with your hand here. You can also create a counterlever with our foot there if you want. I'm not going to in this instance. So we've come to an introductory point, and then inhale again. And on the exhalation, we go a little bit deeper. Back off a bit, working with the breath. We then go further. And you can rest there a little while, and then come out. A bit of gentle rotation, and now we can do the same thing, but with a sideways angle. So again, I'm blocking the foot, blocking his leg here to make a fixed point here. Otherwise, the tendency would be for this leg to come. We want to create a little bit of stretch and opening through the adductors. Fixed point onto my thigh, supporting the knee so there's no possibility of torque through the knee. And with this hand, I'm going to do a little bit of palm pressing. So inhale in and exhale. Inhale in and exhale. And on each breath, you can also travel, your palm can travel up towards the articulation of the knee. Now, depending on the flexibility of your client, you can now go into a deeper stretch. Depending on their flexibility, you might use your shoulder. Matthias has got quite tight hamstrings, so the stretch will not be too deep. And as you do the stretch, with Matthias, all I need to do actually is just straighten my body a little bit, raising the heel up towards the sky, and that in itself for him is a stretch. For someone with more flexibility, you could actually then create a stretch by bringing your chest towards the head, which would open up that joint. There's absolutely no point me doing that because I'm just going to create damage in the tissues, inflammation, tearing, and we don't really want to go there. You can also bring your knee into it and do some pressure, create some pressure points through the hamstrings. Bring the leg out. In fact, I think I'll show you on the other leg because you're going to see better. So I would normally do all the stretches on one side and then go to the other side, but for the purpose of this video, I'm going to show it to you this way. So this again is going to be a stretch for the hamstrings, for the calf muscles, the gastrocnemius, the soleus, the Achilles tendon. And we do this by just resting the base of the leg on your thigh, placing your hand underneath the heel, using your arm to make a counterlever through the foot, placing your other hand on the thigh, and then just sinking back towards the head of the client. And again, this is using your whole body to create the movement. can now stretch the front of the leg into the quadriceps, and this is going to be a stretch that starts by rotating the joint in the hip, the articulation there. We're going to rotate it starting through there, bringing the foot round and back. Now likewise, you'll see a huge range of movement with the people you work with. There'll be some people who can rotate easily and they can have their leg completely flat on the bottom with their knee here. There'll be other people who are very stiff in the articulation of the hip and will need a little bit of support, which you'll provide so you don't create such an intense rotation. Also be mindful here that this is a stretch that then travels back into the lower back, into the lumbar region, and if people have any issues with their discs or have had any particular back problems, you want to be conscious of that so that you work slowly with sensitivity and perhaps with feedback as well, because for some people they may start to feel it pinching in their back, and if that happens you want to ease off a bit. So bring the knee up, heel down, and then that rotation is coming through the hip. Now, this is what I was explaining to you before. There'll be some people who could easily rotate their foot to the side, have their knee flat. This is not the case with Matthias. So I give some support of the leg using my hips. Maybe another, if he came to see me several times, we might find that we could go a bit further with that. And then just some palm presses down. And then bring it back up and out. Shall I show you some more? Yes, maybe I'll show you a little bit more. Okay, another stretch we can do, and this not only works the back of the hamstrings, it also stretches out the lower back. Matthias, I'm going to ask you to place your two hands on below your knees, just below your knees, so you keep your legs straight. Okay, so breathe in and out. Breathe in and out. Breathe in and out. And likewise, you'll find a huge range of motion, mobility and flexibility with this. When you finish, you can just rest your client's legs on your thighs. I'm going to move into another stretch, and for this we want his knees to bend and they're going to fall to the sides. So particularly with people who don't allow their bodies to get floppy and have this tendency to hold on, you may need to give them some indications of what the stretch is going to be about. So in order to get their knees to flex, you can just bend a little bit. See, automatically they start to come into flexion. Hold the heels, push them in and out. Now likewise, this is a stretch that we do by walking through here and bringing the legs forward, and it's a stretch that comes into the lower back. This is also something that will depend on the flexibility of the person. Some people, they'll be able to bring their 2 feet together and have a very open, wide position with their thighs. Other people, it'll be more limited and you'll have less motion. So it's really just a question of working with the body, mind, and spirit of the person that you're receiving. After you you've done that, step back. Bring your knees to support and very gently walk back until the person comes out. You can then finish this by stepping over, hooking the feet underneath your bottom, and with an upright stance, you just very gently lean back, and this will create an extension through the whole of the vertebral column right up to the skull. Release. Again, this is a stretch that's quite interesting to notice what's happening with a person's head. Does it move to one side or the other? Is there a restriction of tissue, of fascia, of musculature in one side of the neck that causes it to draw more easily to one side than the other? And by observing this, you can then use it as information at a later point where you might want to work at releasing one side more than the other, seeing the fascial connections, opening it up, following the lines of movement. It's quite nice just to finish by rocking from one side to another. Bring your feet back into the middle, and then to release the leg down, take your foot, start it by just placing your foot underneath the top of the posterior side of the thigh. Draw it all the way up. Once you've got to the foot, you let it down. Likewise, start at the posterior base of the thigh, draw it all the way up and let it down. Finish off by shaking, doing a little bit of rocking, shaking through, coming to the hip region, shaking out the articulations, creating a bit of movement and mobility through all of those joints. And here also we can have a look and we can see how does the body move, how does the tissue respond? Is there more of a restriction on one side or the other? Are the hips aligned? Is one higher than the other? Is there more of a softness in one side or the other? And if we place both hands on the hips, and we press down, rocking from one side to the other, we can tune into this as well. Is there a sense of tension on one side? Are they equal? Is there balance? And we can use this also to focus our work. I'm going to carry on now into some of the work in the abdomen, and after that we'll probably finish this point and leave some arm work, head and neck work for the next session. Yeah, that's what we'll do. So the stomach is a very sensitive area, one that you need to approach with sensitivity, sense of humility, sense of gentleness. So we come and very, very softly we make contact to begin with. Once you've made contact, you can just have a moment of listening, having a moment of tuning into yourself and also tuning into the other person, just making that connection. You can already start to connect to the tissue. Is it soft? Is it hard? Is there movement? Is there a sense of energy? Is there stagnation? And then can start just by doing some gentle circling in a clockwise direction. This is the direction that will be following the natural direction of the movement of the food through the large intestines. Obviously, if the person's suffering from anything like diarrhea, you would do it in the opposite direction. But in this case, I will just do what you would normally do when there's no issues. Then we're going to imagine that there's a circle in the abdomen and it's like there's a clock there. And we're going to go round that clock, changing our hand position. And we're going to start on one side, sink in, bring our fingers to the other side and create a backwards pressure. Then we move our hand round. Actually, I should be doing it the other way. And you can do the same thing, but so that you don't have to go all the way around the person. So obviously you don't want to be doing this after a heavy meal. Ideally, at any rate, you shouldn't really have a massage after a heavy meal. You should wait for a couple of hours, just in the same way if you were doing yoga or any extreme exercise as well. And we're going to work some points. So find the base of the rib cage with your thumbs like that, so you just know where it is. Come to the point where the rib cage has an angle in it. Slide down. And that's going to be our first 2 points coming in. So with the person's breath, as you see them inhaling, exhaling, you sink in. As they inhale, you come back up. And you can also ask them to breathe in deeply and exhale deeply, so that you actually are working with their breath. And again, that sinking is coming from a movement from your whole body. So your arms are extended, not locked tight, but with some tension through them. And the motion comes by bringing your pelvis forward, allowing you to sink into the tissue. And then we can start by creating a little bit of movement of energy through the sternum. In Chinese medicine, we have this point, Zhenmai 17, in between the two breasts, and this is the sea of qi. So if there's any tiredness that your client's experiencing, or a lack of energy, or you feel that there's stagnation in the tissue, a sort of blockage of the energy through the tissue, this is a very beneficial point to be working. And you can just stimulate it by gently massaging into it, by creating a little bit of pressure and at the same time rotating. You can bring that circular massage movement up through the sternum, and then also along the intercostal spaces. This is an area that can be very tight, particularly for people who work a lot at desks, do a lot of computer work, a lot of work on their phones. We have this tendency to fold in over our chest. Also, people who are emotionally guarded will have this tendency to try and protect their hearts, and they do this by bringing their shoulders forward. So it's a very good area to work on, open up. And we can just finish off by doing some gentle palm pressing through into the shoulder joints. And again, this is a rocking backwards and forwards. Just going to do one more stretch, which is one that I quite like. So, feet on either side, bringing your hands underneath the rib cage. It's very important here to rock back using your weight, so it's this sense of rocking back like this, not keeping your back straight. Now we just open up the lower part of the spine, creating space through the rib cage as well. Okay, so that's what I'm going to show you today. The next one we'll move on to the arms. Hope you enjoyed it. Do a thumbs up if you did. And see you next time.